Hello, my name is Melissa and I'm here with the Abbey Community School Society, ready for our next science experiment. Now before we start, do you remember our 3 very important science rules? Now they're very important, however today we won't actually have to worry about them because we are not doing anything with liquids. But just so that we are all aware of our usual science rules, remember that we don't want to eat or drink anything. We don't want to sniff with our nose, we want to waft. And if you're doing any experiments where things will splash, make sure that your face is not over top of your experiment because you don't want to get anything in your eyes. Okay, so as you can see, our lab today is called Pulleys and Levers, and we're going to be talking about pulleys and levers and our 6 simple machines. Now, for this experiment, we just need a few supplies. We will need a small container with a lid. Okay. We'll need something heavy to put in the container, and I have a bunch of rocks already in my container. We will need some masking tape. We'll also need command hooks, and so when you buy them in the store, the package will look like this. There's big command hooks and mini command hooks. I have the big ones with me today. You'll need between 5 and 8 hooks. Today I have 6, which should be pretty good. And with the command hooks comes some sticky tape. And this tape is said to easily come off walls, but just in case, we're going to be applying the hooks to some poster board. And we want that poster board to be nice and sturdy. So we're going to tape it against a wall today. And you are welcome to do the same. And then it's an easy mess-free thing. We can just take the poster board off the wall and your walls will be still nice and clean. Okay. We will also need some string. So I have 2 meters of string and we'll be using this to tie it around our container and to pull our container up and down for our pulley. So these are the only supplies we will need today. Now before we get started, we're going to mention the 6 simple machines. So today our experiment just covers pulleys and levers, but there are 4 other simple machines that scientists have invented. So one of these simple machines is an inclined plane. And an inclined plane is like a ramp. So you might see ramps outside a rec center or outside your school. Another machine is a screw, and you know what screws do, they hold things together. And a screw is actually made of an inclined plane that moves in a circle, and that's how a screw is formed. Our third one is a wedge, and when I think of a wedge, I think of a triangular object or tool. So I'm thinking of a doorstop, and a doorstop holds 2 pieces of material apart, or it separates these materials. So a doorstop holds apart the bottom of the door from the floor, and it keeps that door propped open. Another type of wedge would be an axe head. So if you ever see somebody chopping wood with an axe, that axe head has a point at the bottom and it splits 2 pieces of wood apart. Okay. We also have a lever, and a lever has a middle pivot point and a beam over top, and the beam can move up and down. I'm thinking of a teeter-totter or even a pair of scissors. The scissors I have here, they have a pivot point in the center where the screw is, and when you use your hand, you're applying a force to this side of the scissors so that you're able to cut paper on the other side. So levers are really important in our everyday lives because scissors are a lever. We also have pulleys, and a pulley is made up of a wheel and string, or rope. So this rope moves along a wheel, and when you pull it down or pull it up, it can lift an object in a different direction. So I'm thinking of a construction crane, or a flagpole, or even a laundry clothesline. All of these things have a rope that moves around a wheel. And when you pull down on a flagpole, the flag rises to the top of the pole. And same thing on the other side. You can always pull up on the rope and the flag can come down. Okay. So we have our lever, our pulley, our screw, our inclined plane, and our wedge. And our last one is our wheel and axle. And I think you all know a wheel and axle example. I'm thinking of a car, right? So we have our two tires, our two wheels connected to our axle, and when we have a force pushing on the wheel and axle, the car starts to move. So these are our 6 simple machines. Now today we are just covering the pulley and the lever in our experiment. We hope to lift up our load or our container of rocks by using string, and this string is going to be moving across our hook. Now if it was an accurate pulley, this hook would have a wheel on it, so as we move our string across the hook or wheel, it would be really smooth to pull it up. But because we're not using a wheel today, this actually turns into more like a lever. So the lever always has a pivot point, a load on one side, and your force on the other. So in this case, you'll be able to see it a little bit later. Our hook is going to be the pivot point of our lever. Our load is our box of rocks, and our force is going to be us pulling down on the string. Okay, so soon enough you'll be able to see the lever and the pulley forming when we make our experiment. Let's go ahead and start putting together our materials. So we're going to first get our container, and we want to put some heavy objects inside. So I've just gone outside and gotten some rocks from the driveway or maybe from the park, and we want to put those rocks inside our container and put our lid on top. If you don't have a lid, that's okay, but when we're lifting our container, make sure your container doesn't flop around and spill your rocks. Okay. Now we are going to take our long string and go to one end of it. Okay? And we want to put this end around our container. So we're going to put our string on the table and our container over top. Enough so that there's enough string on one end to come up over top of your bucket. Okay. And we want to make a couple knots in this string so that it will be able to hold onto our container. Now for this part, if you need help tying a knot, you can ask a parent or an adult to help you out in this part of the experiment. All right, now you can try lifting your bucket right now. So if I do it, my string is going to fall off my bucket. So I'm going to take some masking tape and tape my string to my container so that it doesn't move off the bucket. So I'm going to go at the side and put some tape along the side of the string on both sides of the container. We can try it out now and see if that's enough. It might be, but just for extra protection, I'm going to put a couple pieces of tape along the top ridge of my container so that it's nice and sturdy. Okay, let's test it out now. So it feels nice and sturdy, like my string's not going to come off my container. So this looks good. We're going to move on to the next part of our experiment. So if you haven't finished with your string yet, you can pause the video and come back when you're ready. Okay, now it's time to add our hooks to our poster board paper, okay? If you don't have thick poster board, that's okay. If you have a big piece of cardboard or a big piece of paper, anything, just so we have a place to put our hooks so that we don't have to put the hooks directly on your wall. So we want to attach our hooks in different areas of our poster, because the hook is where we are going to be moving our rope of our pulley on. So the first hook that I think we should put on is at the top of our poster board. It could be in the middle, it could be off to the side, but just as long as it's at the top. Then we have a high point on the pulley that we can use before we work our way down the board. So you're welcome to put all your hooks on at the same time in different parts of the board, or you can try putting one place and then hang your board on the wall and see how your pulley works, and then come back to the table and add more hooks later. So using the tape that comes with it, we're going to peel off one side of the tape and stick it to the back of our hook. Make sure it sticks. And then when you're ready to put it on your paper, you can take the sticky paper off the back so you can stick it on your paper. All right, just like that. Now, as you're applying your hooks, you may want to apply some of your hooks upside down. And that'll be a good way so that we can use our pulley in a different direction. And I'll be able to explain that a little bit later. So now you have maybe 2 hooks on your poster board. Before we add the rest, we want to make sure that we are putting them in the right spot that would make sense when we're lifting our pulley system. Now, you might want to draw it out with a pen or pencil and even map it out on your paper where you think you want your string to move along on your poster board. So instead of just putting the hooks anywhere, you want to think about it and kind of strategize where it would be best to put these hooks. So when you apply your hook, you might want to put it upright. You might want to put it upside down so that when your string moves along it, it is hooking underneath. And if it's hooking underneath, you might be able to lift your string upwards instead of pulling it down. So sometimes pulleys are used to lift objects up, but when you lift them up, you might be lifting your rope up as well. Or like a flagpole, when you're pulling down on the rope, the flag goes up. So that would be when your hook is the right way. You're pulling down on the string and your object moves up. You might want to put your hook on an angle. Okay? Maybe that will change how our pulley works. Will it be easier or will it be harder to move our string along the hook? What do you think? So now I've mapped out in my head where I want my hooks. You're welcome to do the same, or you can even draw it out on the paper like I said before. So I'm going to put the rest of my hooks on my paper, and then I'm going to tape my board up to the wall. And to tape it on the wall, you can ask for adult help, or we want to make sure we're using the correct string so that the paint is not going to come off your wall. So I'm going to be using masking tape today. All right, so let's finish putting our hooks on the paper, and then we can continue. All right, so I'm going to attach my third hook, and this time I'm going to put it upside down, so that when I'm using my string and I'm pulling my string around this hook, when I pull it around this string, I can pull it down or up depending on which way I want to move my bucket of rocks. Now, because I have one upside down, that means the next one should be right side up, so that the string can weave between the hooks. Now I've put this one right side up again because I want my string to move down the rest of my poster board and not come back up. So that's why I put this one right side up. Now I haven't planned out where I want to put this hook, so I'm going to think about it. If I have my string coming around my top hook, around my second one, going upside down, right side up, I might want to pull my bucket this direction so I can use more of my board on this side. So I'm deciding to put mine upside down so that there's a way that I can lift the string upwards and use this space in my board. And you'll be able to see how this works once we attach our pulley system. All right, so this is the result of my hooks. And when you're ready, we're going to attach it to our wall and try it out. All right, so now we are going to put it on the wall. So I already have a piece of masking tape. And for this, if you're not quite tall enough to reach high enough on the wall, then you might want somebody taller who's living in your house to help you out. But it doesn't have to be too tall on the wall. However tall you are, you can put it on the wall. And we're going to add a few more pieces so that this board doesn't fall off when we're lifting up our big container of rocks. Now, the reason why scientists use pulleys and levers and simple machines is because it makes our work easier. So we could lift a big bucket of rocks all the way up a flight of stairs on a construction site, or we could just use a pulley and we wouldn't have to use as much work, right? We wouldn't have to climb up the stairs carrying a big heavy object. We could stand up the top of the building and just by pulling on the rope, you can get a container up to the top. So it makes our work a lot easier. And this is something we call mechanical advantage. So if a machine has mechanical advantage, that means it is making our work easier. So we're only putting a little bit of force into the machine, but the machine is pumping out so much more force and so much more work. So in that case, it's a really good way for us to use machines. All right, so we'll try that out for the strength of the tape, and if our board gets a little bit loose later on when we have our weight on it, we can always add some more tape. So let me grab my container of rocks. For this, we want to make sure that the string is strong enough to hold our container. So you might notice that this string is quite thin, but it is still strong enough to hold my container. So make sure that the string that you're using is strong enough. Okay. So what we first want to do is we're just going to use one pulley. Okay. So that means you can pick any hook that is on your board, and we're just going to use one for this first experiment. All right, so right now my bucket is stable. I'm staying on the table. All right, we are putting the string over top of the hook so that the end you're holding is on the side that you are standing. Okay, so in just a minute, I'm going to try and lift this bucket off the table. All right, and you can try the same. All right, so you can see that I'm pulling down, and which direction is my container going? It's going up, right? So it's going the opposite direction, right? So now if I want to put this bucket on the ground again, or on the table, I'm going to let it slowly go down, still using the pulley, and carefully lift it on the table. Okay. Now, do you think it's easier for us to just take the container and lift it up, or do you think it is easier to use the pulley? You can test that out. So we just take our string off the hook and grab your container and lift it up. Okay. Is it pretty easy to lift your container? All right. Feel how heavy it is? Okay. Now let's use our pulley again, just on one hook. Lift it. Whoops! So my tape on my board wasn't quite strong enough and it pulled the tape off. That's okay if that happens. We're just going to add some extra reinforcement. And if you have an adult in your house or an older sibling, they can always hold the top of your board so that it stays in place. So let's try it again. Remember how heavy it was to lift your bucket? So we're using our hook again. We're gonna pull down. And I'd say it's pretty easy to lift the bucket. Now this bucket is pretty light. There's a few rocks in it, but imagine if you had a bigger bucket full of rocks. It would be harder to lift just by using your hand. And then imagine using a pulley system where you're just pulling on the string. It's going to be much easier to lift that bucket of rocks. Okay. Now you'll notice that this is a pulley, but this pulley does not have a wheel at the top. So just like I said before, because this doesn't have a wheel, the string moving on the hook has more friction. And that friction is a type of force that is moving against the string. And it's making it harder for us to lift the bucket. But imagine having the hook as a wheel. A wheel has less friction. So when our string moves along the wheel, there's less friction and it's easier for the string to move. Okay. And because we aren't using a wheel right now, that's why I said earlier that we've made a pulley, but it's also more like a lever because it doesn't have that wheel. Okay, so you'll notice that my board was coming off the wall, so I stopped and I taped all the way around my board to keep that board on the wall. So now we can test out our pulley system. So this one we're going to use 4 hooks to start off with. So we're going to take our string and hook it over our first one, our second one, our third one, which is upside down, and our fourth one, okay? So for this, we want to pull on it and see if it's easier to lift up our object or if it's harder because we're using more hooks. So let's test it out. I am pulling right now, and it's really hard to lift my bucket. Okay, so I'm using 4 hooks, but because they're not wheels in a normal pulley, there's more friction on our string, making it harder for us to lift up the bucket. So let's take it down again. And you can try yours now. So try your 4 hooks, 3, 4, 5 hooks, and see if it's harder or if it's easier to lift your bucket. Now that we've used 4 hooks, we are going to try using all of our hooks. So you might have 8 hooks, but I have 6 hooks. So we want to hook our string along all 6 hooks. Okay, so you'll notice that I only have a little bit of string left. So when you are using your string, make sure you have enough string. So this is enough for us to pull on. Okay, so we are going to pull down and see if we can lift our bucket up. It's not really working, okay? So you'll notice that based on the angles of our string, it's a little bit harder to lift our bucket because our string is not just moving up and down. Now it's moving on angles, up and down, side by side, okay? So having our string this way on our hooks, it's making it a little bit harder to lift up our bucket, okay? All right, so now we're going to take our string off this pulley system, and we're just going to use 2 hooks, so the top hook and the bottom hook. Now remember, my bottom one is upside down, so because of this, we can use it in a different way. So we're going to hook it around the right side of the hook. Now we're going to lift up instead of down and see which direction our bucket is going to move. Okay, so you'll notice how far up my hand is. I'm lifting up, the bucket is moving up, but it's actually taking a little bit more string for me to move. So it's making it easier because I'm lifting upwards, but I'm gonna have to use a little bit more string to lift my bucket all the way to the top of the board. So you can try this at home using your right side up hooks and your upside down hooks and see which way you can make it so that it's easier to lift up your bucket, or which ways it makes it harder to lift up your bucket. So this is the end of our pulley system and our levers today. I hope you enjoyed it, and you can always try it again some other day.